Good evening, folks. How are you doing today? Hope you're having a great time. Hope you're having a great weekend so far. Did you happen to watch that great match? Manchester United versus Newcastle. See Ronaldo is back. Now, a lot of money is being poured into the EPL, into the English Premier League, and that's simply because a lot of businesses are actually paying their taxes. So as businesses are paying their taxes, of course, it creates more wealth within the economy, and then that means that things happen a bit more fluidly. So even the government, is able to now create a more enabling environment. In a lot of cases, things happen. In some cases, like in African countries, a lot of people are scared. A lot of people are worried about their paying taxes, and then those taxes do not transmit into government, actually giving them any form of infrastructure and enabling environment to actually run their businesses and be able to pay more tax. Last weekend, we were going to interview a Nigerian that has moved to Rwanda, who's running his business in Rwanda and all that. And he was going to be telling us quite a few things about Rwanda and the enabling environment that was put into place. But unfortunately, he couldn't attend. But shocker of all shocker, still talking about business, especially when it comes to Nigeria, a dramatic turn of events, a lot of people might say. And what is that dramatic turn of events? It was actually the issue of the federal government having issues with state governments over the issue of VAT. Now, the issue of VAT, value added tax, everybody knows that you have to pay your taxes. Who you pay your taxes to, a lot of people are not aware. As a matter of fact, when it comes to federating units, apparently there are laws that actually dictate who collects what and when that is collected. All these things are actually included in what we call the exclusive list, the concurrent list, and the residual list. For most Nigerians, that seems like quite a lot. What is an exclusive list, residual list, and all of that? It sounds a bit complex, but in actuality, it is not. It's actually just a case of a list that actually shows what the federal government is responsible for, what the states are responsible for, and what the local governments are supposed to be responsible for. But unfortunately, for most of us, we have no idea what these things are. We were going to have on a guest tonight, Mr. Kunle Lawal, who is the director, executive director of the Electoral College Nigeria. But Mr. Lawal has been having technical problems. He's presently in Port Harcourt, so he's trying to sort that out. So he'll probably join us as we go along. But the question is Nigeria actually on the road to restructuring? Because if the River State government took the federal government to court to actually clear the air on this issue of value added tax, that means that things are beginning to happen. But is this actually the beginning? Is this where it started from? Did this start from Governor Wike of River State taking the federal government to court? We'll tell you a little bit about that when we come back shortly after this quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Hello once again. So if you're just joining us, you're welcome to another edition of Just Phantom. And tonight we're going to be talking about Nigeria, if probably Nigeria is on the road to restructuring. So why do we say that Nigeria might be on the road to restructuring? Well, Nigerians have been clamoring for restructuring for quite a while now. A lot of angst in different parts of the country on the way governments is being run. And when I say governments, I mean federal, state, and local government. Local governments are supposed to be the closest in terms of access to the people. But in Nigeria, we are seeing a strange case where the local governments are just local governments in name. A lot of them actually don't perform, the functions that you would expect them to perform. Some of those functions include education. They're supposed to have local government education authorities, but for some strange reason, they don't do that. And when we talk of funding, local governments seem to have been starved of funds. Starved of funds from where? From the state governments. The state governments themselves are always in Abuja and always going to go and try, to get handouts from the federal government. Now, why should states who are supposed to be thriving, are supposed to be innovative and creating enabling environments for people, be struggling to actually raise funds? Apparently, one of the reasons why they struggle seriously to raise funds is the fact that the amount of taxation that they could actually carry out is quite limited. So a lot of them actually didn't have access to funds. Some have been very innovative, like when you look at the issue of Lagos State. Lagos has been very innovative with different types of taxation that Lagos does, both the legal illegal and the illegal legal. Well, that is in my own opinion. And probably that will be another topic for another day when we talk about the structure of taxation in Lagos State and how it is carried out and what a lot of people see and what people don't see. We are doing quite a lot of extensive research on that, so we'll get to that at some point. But recently, a few days ago, the River State government took the Federal Inland Revenue Service and the federal government, of course, to court over the issue of value-added tax. Value-added tax has been a matter in contention for quite a while. And when we say quite a while, a lot of people actually think that the River State government taking, the FIRS and the federal government to court is the first case. Well, in actuality, it is not the first case. As a matter of fact, there have been 3 cases before that. But 2 of those cases was actually over the issue of what fields the value-added tax covered, while one was actually on the constitutionality of the value-added tax. And now, the River State government, against the Federal Inland Revenue Service, is also on the issue of the constitutionality of the federal government collecting tax, value-added tax, that is, as opposed to the states. Now, first, let us look at where they started from. Incidentally, the first place that this actually started from was Lagos State. So Lagos filed, a case against the Attorney General and Federal Inland Revenue in 2009 over the issue of sales tax. Lagos State wanted to introduce sales tax in Lagos. But sales tax would have been a duplication of the value-added tax, more or less. Now, the difference is, for value-added tax, this tax is collected at different stages of an entire life cycle. So from the farmer to the manufacturer, from the manufacturer to the wholesaler or to the retailer, as the case might be, and then the entire VAT is collected across board like that. Sales tax actually means that you pay the tax at the tail end of the entire life cycle. So that means you walk into a supermarket, you're going to go and buy a bottle of Fanta, then you now pay sales tax on the Fanta. So, of course, the Federal Inland Revenue looked at Lagos State, they went to court and they had a long battle over it. And as it turned out, of course, it was a duplication. So naturally, Lagos State more or less lost that particular case in 2009 because the courts actually declined Lagos being able to introduce the sales tax. Then, surprisingly, in 2017, Kano State enacted a consumption tax. Now, a consumption tax basically just means what it is. For everything that you buy or for everything that you eat or whatever, so far you're paying for it, you're supposed to pay tax on it. Now, they paying tax on it means that it's a duplication of the value-added tax. So, hey, how was that supposed to happen? Luckily, the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association contested this case in court and won, citing double taxation due to VAT being charged or being collected by the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Secondly, Kogi State decided to introduce something similar, which was a state tax on consumable goods and services. Also, sorry, my mistake, that was in 2015. So Kogi State actually, came after Lagos before coming out with it up. So Kogi State, tried, to introduce a consumption tax. And what would happen? Well, the Kogi State Hoteliers Association decided to take the Kogi State Board of Internal Revenue to court to challenge the legality of that, tax on consumables and services. And of course, one way or the other, the judges knowing exactly what it is that they're doing because that's what they're going to do, interpret the law. The judges now interpreted the law and said, no, Kogi State could not collect another form of tax, more or less sales tax, because that's what tax on consumables is. You couldn't collect the tax because VAT was already covering that field. So now you see where there are a lot of issues when it comes to clarity on the law in itself. For a lot of people, they don't understand these things, and you can't blame them because sometimes the law can be so complex, especially when you look at the way the law is structured. And that's why you have lawyers. That's why lawyers, actually have to look at these things and be able to interpret them. But then also, a specialist type of lawyer to be able to look at the structure of the taxation and be able to interpret it for you as a business owner or as a member of the management team of a business. Now, Federal High Court in Lagos Division granted perpetual injunction against FIRS in 2019 against collecting VAT from hotels, restaurants, and event centers, as collection was within the exclusive competence of state governments. Now, this happened as a result of Eco Hotels Limited. Lagos State enacted a law and said we were going to be collecting these taxes based on the hospitality sector. And Eco Hotel looked at it and said, but if we're going to be paying you, and we're also still going to be paying VAT to the Federal Inland Revenue Service, then we're going to have a big problem. So they now decided to go and contest that in court and challenge it. Now, of course, Lagos State fought, and luckily, Lagos State won that battle. So it is now a case of Lagos State collects the tax when it comes to the hospitality sector. So those are the cracks that were already in the wall before the issue of Rivers State government. So now Rivers State government has actually now won. Rivers State government has enacted a law on collection of VAT. Lagos State has also gone ahead to now enact that same law, more or less, as well, including the anti-open grazing bill, which has been in contention for quite a while. They've done that as well. So now what does that basically mean? First things first, two cases on whether VAT cover the tax fields when it comes to certain areas, and also two cases on the constitutionality of VAT Act when it comes to the federal government collecting VAT. Now, for a lot of people who might ask, what exactly are the implications of all of this on the common man? Well, I will state my own opinion at some point, but first, let's listen to our in-house barrister who gives us advice or gives us his opinion as well on such matters. His name is Kingsley Chime.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chime Kingsley. I'm happy to be here tonight to give a perspective, the legal perspective on the controversial VAT issue that has inundated both the social and print media in the past weeks. It will be recalled that on August 11th, 2021, Federal High Court sitting in Rivers State, Port Harcourt, declared that the Rivers State government has the power to collect revenue accruing from taxable income. What that simply means is that the court had declared that the Rivers State House of Assembly has the competence to legislate on matters relating to VAT. That by combining provisions of the Constitution, the issue of taxable income is at the concurrent legislative list. So that matter had already been appealed. It's currently at the Court of Appeal, sitting in Abuja. We are still awaiting the determination of the Court of Appeal on that issue. While that was raging, there has been some interpretation, and people have tried to make a permutation as the consequences of this order of court. Because the matter is currently pending at the appropriate appellate court, I would try as much as I could not to delve into the substance of the appeal in order not to offend the sub judice principles. In a nutshell, Rivers State had argued that it is unequitable for revenue generated under their state to be shared under a derivative fund to some other states that brings little to nothing on the table. And by the provisions of the law, they have the competence to collect revenue accruing from value-added tax. That was the fulcrum of the controversy. Now, the Court of Appeal just recently has declared that parties should maintain status quo and not to take actions that is capable of undermining or rendering nugatory the outcome of the appeal. You know, there's some positions legal to collect revenue accruing from taxable income. What that simply means is that the court had declared that the Rivers State House of Assembly has the competence to legislate on matters relating to VAT. That by combining provisions of the Constitution, the issue of taxable income is at the concurrent legislative list. So that matter had already been appealed. It's currently at the Court of Appeal, sitting in Abuja. We are still awaiting the determination of the Court of Appeal on that issue. While that was raging, there has been some interpretation, and people have tried to make a permutation as the consequences of this order of court. Because the matter is currently pending at the appropriate appellate court, I would try as much as I could not to delve into the substance of the appeal in order not to offend the sub judice principles. In a nutshell, Rivers State had argued that it is unequitable for revenue generated under their state to be shared under a derivative fund to some other states that brings little to nothing on the table. And by the provisions of the law, they have the competence to collect revenue accruing from value-added tax. That was the fulcrum of the controversy. Now, the Court of Appeal just recently has declared that parties should maintain status quo and not to take actions that is capable of undermining or rendering nugatory the outcome of the appeal. You know, there's some positions legal for revenue generated under their state to be shared under a derivative fund to some other states that brings little to nothing on the table. And by the provisions of the law, they have the competence to collect revenue accruing from value-added tax. That was the fulcrum of the controversy. Now, the Court of Appeal just recently has declared that parties should maintain status quo and not to take actions that is capable of undermining or rendering nugatory the outcome of the appeal. There's some positions legal communities have taken in respect of whether or not that could amount to a stay of execution of judgment of the court. But before I analyze that aspect, it must be noted that the argument of the River State High Court, River State government, is that revenues accruing from their state cannot be shared to other states in the guise of derivative funds. That is inequitable for government of River State, for instance, that generated over 15.1 billion naira in VAT, and only about 3 point something billion or 4 point something billion were remitted to it, while a government of Kano State generated 2.1 billion and got 2.8 billion. Sorry, generated 2.8 billion and got 2.8 billion from the federal government. So that is unequitable, and it is important that states should be able to, manage the resources accruing from their respective states. It is no longer a case of monkey the war, babu the chop, and I believe it is a good thing to happen in Nigeria. It is one of those things that may trigger devolution of power in Nigeria. Now, the Court of Appeal, in fact, consequent upon the order of the court in River State, the River State House of Assembly smartly, passed a law on VAT. And I heard recently that I have even commissioned a tax committee on River State. And in a similar vein, the Lagos State government has also seen the need for them to
So, like he rightly said, we're sorry we had to cut that short at that point in time. So, like he rightly said, this might be the beginning of devolution of power, i.e., restructuring that a lot of Nigerians have been clamoring for quite a while. Now, let us now just take a cursory look at what this might imply in terms of state governments, local governments, and the ordinary people. Because the most important part of all of this is the people. What implication does it have on people? When we first started this discussion tonight, I was talking about the English Premier League and the amount of money that goes into the English Premier League, how people, follow the English Premier League, religiously. People buy merchandise and all sorts of stuff. The amount of tax that is generated from that alone is massive. Massive. So now imagine if, for instance, your sports sector starts to thrive. States are going to be generating money because Nigerians are sports loving, they are football loving. But that is talking about the top end of things. At the lower end of things, on a day-to-day basis, what this means, in my own layman's opinion, is this. If states start to collect VAT on goods and services, then there'll be nowhere for politicians to hide anymore. Politicians will not be able to tell us that they have not collected federal allocation. Each state will now be forced to think, not just outside the box, but to be able to work without even thinking that there's a box. A lot of creativity will now start coming into play. Because for you to be able to collect value added tax, you must first put in the infrastructure, the enabling environment for people to first be able to do their business. If people can't do their business, then how are they going to pay their tax? So this is actually just the very beginning. The farmer who is going to sell to the manufacturer who will collect VAT. on behalf of the government. The manufacturer, on selling to the retailer or to the wholesaler who's going to sell to the retailer, will also do the same. Now, it is not a case of they all pay, like say for instance in Nigeria that is 7.5%. They don't each pay 7.5%. They pay according to their level of input at that particular point in time, to my understanding. But at the tail end, it all adds up to the 7.5% that you admitted into the coffers of each environment that they are operating in. So if the farmer in Jigawa is able to farm, once he's selling his products, his farm, the harvest, to that manufacturer in Kogi, the manufacturer in Kogi pays him, there's some tax. But the manufacturer in Kogi finishes manufacturing his products and is selling to that man who is going to retail or wholesale in Ibadan. Some tax is also paid at that point in time. And then we all have taxes shared across the board. Now, this also could pose several problems along the line. Are the governors going to sit down and standardize tax? Are they going to say, okay, you know what, across the board, all of us, let's cooperate. We should not charge more than X amount of VAT in each of those states. Now, let's not forget, partly where they started from was from the issue of some states generating more money than others. A lot of those states that are not generating money is because there's no business going on there, more or less. So now they have to now start thinking first. How do they generate the money in the initial to start putting in the infrastructure in their states to enable businesses to operate in their states, generate revenue, and then pay tax? Tough one, yeah? Yes, it is. But what this also translates into is this. Give or take in a short period of time, you will not come forward as a politician if you lack ideas. Because the people that you're going to talk to tell them that you want to become a governor or you want to become a local government chairman, you have to be able to tell them how you intend to use your brain to put plans in place, to be able to generate money, to put infrastructure in your environment so that you can generate money from those environments. It's not going to be business as usual anymore. A lot of people have said there's too much power at the center. Probably. But a lot of people have also had issues when it comes to state governments and the amount of money, that just never gets to the local government level, and then local governments, cannot do their own jobs. But everything is a step at a time. By the time you take the first step and then you have achieved something, which is if the Court of Appeal decides that yes, the states, it's actually within their competence, exclusive competence to collect VAT, then the states will now have to start, giving accounts to their people. Now, of course, a lot of people have said it is easier for them to approach the government house than to approach state house in Abuja. Now, state house are collecting VAT and generating, billions of naira in revenue will now have to be accountable to the people. After a while, I'm sure the heat will be too much on the state government. They would have to deal with the local governments and make sure that the local governments are doing their jobs as well. And then the local governments will also now be answering to the people. Most people don't know who their local government chairmen are because most of them are non-functional. They're just political office holders. They play little or no role in the development of their people. So at the end of the day, what do people truly need them for? So they become a tier of government that is just sucking money out of the system and not giving any productivity, nothing in return. But when there's a devolution of powers and each segment of government, each tier, their roles are clearly defined, then things will start to happen. Nigeria, in context, is a rich country. But in reality, Nigeria is a poor country. It is not about the way you dress that tells people exactly how much you're worth. Actual truth of what you're worth is what is in your bank balance. That's that's just the reality. Either that or the amount of assets and investments that you have. The only thing that we have seen that has been working in Nigeria since 1900, as they would say, has been oil. But before oil, there was agriculture. Now, agriculture is slowly starting to pick up. And you cannot have industrialization without agriculture. Slowly beginning to pick up, and things might probably start to happen from there. Most of the food that is consumed in the south comes from the north. It's time for northern governors, northern political office holders to start thinking of how they will create irrigation systems for their people to be able to farm. Once those people are farming, then support services start to come up. Logistic services have to come up because the produce has to move from those remote areas that are farmed into the main markets where those goods are going to be sold. So the logistics companies, the truck drivers, the bus drivers, and all that are also going to be paying tax. The markets, the people who are in the markets who are going to be reselling these products are also going to be paying tax. So slowly you'll be able to generate money to develop your environment. The only reason why they have banditry up north is simply because of the mass poverty. The people that are hungry cannot read, they can't go to school. I know tons of people from up north who are well educated. Tons of them. So it's not as if the average northerner doesn't want education. They do want education. But for the poor man on the streets, how is he going to get the education when he's hungry? The same goes for quite a few other states, because you also have states like Osun who are generating next to nothing. So it's about time they all start looking inward. They all start asking themselves questions and say, are we sure of what we're about to do? Because like they say, be careful what you wish for. Because if you fight a battle and then you are given the rights, exclusive rights, which should be the case, to collect VAT, that means you're expanding your tax net as a state. Then you better think very carefully of how you're going to be able to put those enabling environments in place, how you're going to be able to provide infrastructure for people, so roads, electricity, and things like that. They have to start thinking about them. As a matter of fact, one suggestion, please just create tech hubs. Call the renewable energy specialists in the state and put them together, and go into a PPP of some sort and all whatnot. Start from there first. Because the cheapest way to raise good revenue right now is from technology. Startup companies are small businesses that can generate exponential amounts of money. Maybe you should start looking at that. Maybe you should start asking people, what do you think we can do? Form town halls, do all sorts of stuff. Call the experts. Try and start thinking before you cross that line. The average Nigerian is tired. There's too much going on. Even I am overwhelmed when I look at the Nigerian situation, simply because there's just so much going on. There's just so much going on. I listened to a Nigerian lawyer on Arise on Tuesday or Wednesday, was it? His name is Rotimi Fanwo. And he said, you know the way the law is in Nigeria. I mean, a lawyer. He himself, anyway, he says he's retired, he's not practicing anymore. But he himself is actually like, what's the hope? What's the way forward? Where do we start? Local governments are the closest to the people. Local governments need to be funded. We need to stop all the finger pointing, all the tier bashing. When I say tier bashing, state government bashing, federal government bashing, local government. These things have to change. There are countries that don't have any mineral resources. All they have is human resources. And they use their human resources to the best of their advantage. And they actually do develop their country. Nigeria has human resources, Nigeria has mineral resources, and Nigeria has a land mass. And you also have the coastal waters. So what else is there? Everything is in abundance. But we keep talking about the same things over and over and over and over and over again. Simply because a few elements do not want things to work in Nigeria. The majority of Nigerians want things to work. I said to somebody some time ago when we were having a discussion about migration, legal and illegal migration and all that. The average Nigerian who travels abroad, maybe illegal migration, and lives abroad for 15 years before he's actually able to become a legal resident or a citizen of that country that he's in, he or she, the first thing they do is they come back to Nigeria. Yeah, probably most of them for a holiday, quick holiday, just come and For some, maybe the idea is to come and show people are alive. But for whatever reason, the point is this. If Nigerians could travel to a lot of countries visa free, a lot of Nigerians would not migrate illegally. They would stay in Nigeria, in their country, because the opportunities in Nigeria are endless. But without an enabling environment, how can they do that? Well, I'm not a legal expert, neither am I a tax, neither am I a tax expert. But soon we're going to be talking to a tax expert. He's a lawyer and a tax consultant. We're going to be talking to him. And here is his own view on how VAT per state can work, how it can be structured, and then where things can pick up from. But in the meantime, Nigerians, I mean, we need to start looking at ourselves and we need to start asking ourselves, do we need things to work? If we need things to work, then it's time to actually start participating in governance. Now, you don't have to be a political office holder to participate in government. There are different ways that you can participate. What I am doing right now is my own way of participation, which is lending my voice to what is going on. Another way you can lend your voice to what is going on is being able to speak out, being able to ask questions. The more people that ask questions, the more people will be obliged to give you answers. Fingers crossed. This is probably the beginning, like our in-house barrister said, the beginning of the evolution of powers. Maybe we'll now begin to see things actually taking shape and working the way we want them to work. Now, it's a short show today. Before we go, our social message, we have not left the issue of rape. We still talk about it consistently and we still say no to rape. There was an issue just last week of a young woman who was raped and murdered that we read about somewhere. It was very disheartening that that is still happening. The rate of crime is not commensurate to the intelligence of Nigerians generally, especially when it comes to violent crimes. Now, everybody is not safe because if something happens to you and you don't speak out against it, it's probably going to happen to somebody you know, and then it's probably going to happen to you. So it's time we started speaking out against rape. Rape is a plague when it comes to the world in general. So it's not a Nigerian thing. It's not a black thing, like we always say. But it is a dangerous thing. So please tweet something, say something, wear a t-shirt, whatever. Say no to rape. You can use any of the hashtags on your screen. No excuse, no to rape, and say something against it. Now, COVID-19 is still very real and it's coming out in different variants. Of course, they always try to pass the buck to Africa. So they say that it's a South African variant. It's not a case of there's a South African variant. It's actually a case of South Africa has one of the most advanced laboratories in the world. And because of their focus on virology, they quickly detect different variants. So it's not a case of those variants, coming out of South Africa or anything. But it's become much more dangerous. We still need to be very careful. Like we said before, it's not in case of COVID will go away. Just put your mind to living with COVID and maintaining a safe distance. Still wear a mask in most places, especially in buses or when you go to hotels or whatever. Anywhere it is essential for you to wear a mask, please do. It might be difficult to do that in restaurants. It might be difficult to do that when you go and watch football matches and all of that. We know that. People are tired and all that, but still, we still need to try to be a bit careful and a bit worried about what's going on so that we can all live safe, healthy, long lives. Thank you for taking out the time to join us again tonight. We'll see you same time next weekend when we come back and we're talking about whatever is trending. But most likely, we think it's still going to be the issue of this VAT because a few more states are going to sign it into law. We'll see you then. You take care and good
Already means they are rated under their state.